Hi viewers, this is Rajesh. Today I would like to explain how a typical software architecture will be. So we'll have different layers in any project. So we'll have a UI layer, controller layer, service layer, TO layer, and database we'll call it as persistent layer as well. So from UI means we can call it as client or browser. We can have different users can hit uh, the application, right? So whenever your action when you when you are submitting an action, different users hitting an action, the same action or else different action will be, first the action will goes to the controller and then service and this DAO and then database, we'll call it as persistent layer. So we have presentation layer, controller layer, service layer, DAO layer, persistent layer. So why we'll have this much of layers? Can't we make it all in one layer? Yes, we can make it. But the issue is the code will be clumsy and highly uh, if you want to update something, we can't able to identify the code where we need to modify and the dependency how it will be reflect in other areas. We need to trace it out where and all it affect the code. So for the standard sake, this aggregated all the UI like HTML, JSP, ASP, any kind of stuff. They make it as JavaScript. All the UI related stuff maintained in UI layer. And the controller will we have front controller here. What is meant by front control? It is also one of the design pattern. So front controller is whenever the uh, different actions will be there, right? For each action if you write different controller, we can't able to maintain the code in a proper way. So if you'd like to change the flow, we have to identify that particular controller and we need to modify that flow. So instead of, we'll have a frameworks. Let's start Spring. So we'll have a front controller for that. Coming to starts 1.3, we'll have a action servlet. And coming to starts 1.3, it is action servlet. Starts 2, it's dispatcher servlet. Coming to Spring MVC, dispatcher servlet. So this we can call it as front controller. Means from whatever the request you submitted, it will submit it to only one front controller. It will receives and delegates the request as appropriate. So then it will we can have n number of services, right? So that particular controller will delegate to that particular service. So in that service mainly meant for business logic, we'll write the business logic here, not in the controller, not in the DO layer. So once we wrote the controller, then we will do the operation, right? After business operation, whatever the UI they have given, taking the input, suppose we are doing insert operation, so we'll take all the details and we'll manipulate all the date things in the service layer, and we will just persist it in DO layer. So we'll delegate the uh, action of persistence, means connecting to the DB, and whatever the operations we do with the card operations, like card operations means create, update, retrieve, delete. So create means we'll insert one or multiple records in the DB. Update means we'll update the record in the DB. Retrieve means we'll select the record or records from the DB. Delete means will delete a record from the DB. So all these CERD operations is happened in DAO layer. So in DAO layer, whatever the technologies we can use is we can use JPA. JPA is a specification, Java Persistent API. So it is an specification, and that can be, we can have implementation of Hypernet. Hypernet is a ORM framework. So ORM framework is object is directly mapping to table. So instead of writing JDBC, earlier we write the JDBC, Java database connectivity. We need to identify the data type. We need to ensure exception handling. All we need to do in JDBC layer, earlier JDBC. So ORM frameworks like Hypernet will reduce our burdens like connectivity and all. So we can use Spring Data Repository as well. It is the latest version Spring. We can have a Spring Data Repository. They will provide the CERD operations directly. If you want, you can uh, write your own also, but they will give default CERD operations whatever you can do with. And IBAT is coming to IBAT is, suppose it is like it is also like ORM. So we'll write if you write a join query, and the output, if you select for two or more columns, we can directly get that properties into one POJO in IBATIS. Okay, so different from different browsers, what how many users might be, all the request goes to front controller. So it identifies which controller, it identifies the particular service need to be called. From that service will call into the DAO layer. From the DAO layer will persist the data. The similarly it is in the case of insert. So if you want to retrieve that reverse process, so the same it will get. So here we'll select from the DB. So from the here we'll get into service layer, and then here into the controller, and then to the UI layer. So this was called loose coupling. So tomorrow the client will say, instead of using Hypernet, I will go for IBITIS. Then you no need to touch the service layer. We can call like service dot service interface will so DAO interface dot that particular method. So as you know that, so if you have an interface, and that interface has n number of implementation, so if you insert which kind of object, which which you initialize to that interface, object will initialize, that method will be called in same way. So we can able to loosely coupled the layers. So instead of touching the service layer, we are alone changing each DAO layer. In the same way other layers as well. This is very useful. And coming to the next video, I will tell you how this service will be called in a practical way. Thank you. Thanks for listening. Have a good day.